How's it going, everyone? So, today I'd like to talk to all of you about how to effectively prepare for the Mcat. I often see this question posted either online or somebody's always hitting me up asking me, hey, how did you prepare for the Mcat? What did you do for it? Did you have a schedule? Did you take classes, etc., etc., etc.? So, first and foremost, the best recommendation that I can make for everyone that's either considering writing the Mcat or has already written the Mcat and plans on retaking it. Whatever the case may be, the first and most important thing I recommend you do is to actually go visit the AAMC website. And when you go there, you're actually able to go ahead and take a look at basically the syllabus that breaks down all the different content that the MCAT could challenge you on. Now, the MCAT exam itself is quite a long exam, and although AAMC posts a lot of that information there on all the different content that you could be asked, in most cases, they're not going to ask all that content. You see, the MCAT exam, while it is a challenging exam, it's not necessarily testing you on your ability to memorize X amount of content. It's more about application and just to gauge how well you can do with applying the skills that you have developed. And so that's what that syllabus there is basically for. So if you are considering writing the MCAT exam, I definitely think that's the first place that you should start at. Don't even bother asking people how I should study or etc. like that. Just get to the primary source of information and take a look at what kind of content could possibly show up on the exam that you're going to write. Now, besides that, there are a few tips to how to effectively study for the MCAT exam, and I'm primarily speaking from my own experience with how I wrote my own exam and what I basically did to prepare for it. And today, that's exactly what I'm here to do, is just share that with all of you. So tip one, it's a pretty basic tip. It's just about getting started. And that can be a little bit tricky for some people because they have all this information in front of them but don't really know where to begin with that. So my first recommendation is to pretty much figure out when you're choosing or when you plan on really writing the exam. Again, speaking from experience, I don't think it's going to benefit you to just choose an exam a month away from the day you actually decide, hey, I want to go write the MCAT. It's not the best strategy, and if you do plan on, or you hope to do well on the MCAT exam, you want to have a plan of action. You don't want to just jump into it. And it's not a free exam either, so you're going to pay quite a bit of money to write it. And depending on when you go ahead and book an exam or where you do book it, it's quite costly. So take that into consideration and just start to figure out how you can effectively bridge that gap between where you currently are at and then getting to the place where you're going to write your MCAT. So with getting started, let's at this point figure out everything that you currently need in order to get started. Are you a first year university student that's planning on writing the MCAT? Are you in your third year? Have you graduated? Things like that. Take that into consideration now. Take into consideration everything you've studied in your postgraduate career. And going off of that then, and going off of what I previously recommended by checking out the syllabus online and seeing what kind of core concepts the MCAT is going to basically challenge you on, how much of that information do you currently already know? Now, tip number 2 is to definitely plan ahead. Nobody wants to go in writing the MCAT and then just absolutely bombing. Again, the MCAT is an endurance test in a way that isn't just challenging you with your ability to memorize certain concepts and then to basically regurgitate it. You have to actually be able to apply the content that you have studied for all this time. So at this point, after you've already figured out, okay, this is when I plan on writing the MCAT, here's all my content that I'm going to pull from, study from, etc., break it down now. Break down piece by piece. What is your study schedule going to look like? Are you going to go through and basically study all the content that's there that the Mcat could possibly challenge you on? Or are you kind of going to take a look at your strengths and weaknesses? Many of you have probably gone through many of these courses in undergrad. Most likely you have, because a lot of med schools still do require you to have completed at least first year of sciences, second year organic chemistry, third year biochemistry, etc. So you kind of have a good base to stand on. Now it's just about putting the pieces together, really. So definitely plan ahead with that. Don't jump in. Don't have this assumption that you have 6 weeks and this is the only day that you can write the Mcat now, and you plan on getting a 528 or whatever. Statistically speaking, it doesn't happen. It's not common. Even when people prepare ahead of time, they don't do very well. It all depends on how well you do. How well do you spend your time? How well do you go through this content then, and at the same time practice? So break it down. Getting ready for the Mcat is more than just study, pulling out a book and reading it, going through the Kaplan books, Princeton Review. Weigh it out. Take a look where you can divide your time. Most likely you're not going to be studying 24 hours, right? So yeah, go through that, build a study schedule, plan ahead, and that's that. Tip number 3. So it seems like I'm really beating a dead horse here by saying don't memorize. But that's really, really important, because you are honestly going to just bomb the Mcat if all you rely on is memorization. I can pull the Princeton Review, a 2016 Princeton Review that's just on my shelf, and I can basically read all of it. But, I'm not going to memorize all that content, and I could be spending my time more effectively. You see, the Mcat isn't going to challenge you at all on just memorization. Yes, you will have to know core concepts. Yes, you will have to memorize amino acids and etc. And I'm not saying don't memorize. But what I'm saying is don't just think that you can get by and do well on the Mcat exam by just memorizing. I know some people, and people that I've talked to as well, when it comes to the exams they've taken in university, a lot of people say, well, it's simple. I just memorized it, studied it maybe 3-4 days, even the night before, did fairly well, did well, whatever. But the Mcat isn't designed for that. It's designed specifically so that people don't do well and rely on memorization. And it comes back to really how education, and in my personal opinion, how education should be. It shouldn't be about memorization and regurgitating all this information and then never relying on it ever again. I feel like, and again, personally, I feel like education is about learning. And that's what the Mcat is all about. Do you devote your time? How well do you devote that time then? And how well do you study in that time that you have? Do you apply any of the knowledge that you have recently acquired, the stuff that you've read? So going forward, take your time and do some research. On this channel alone, I will be providing more resources. In future videos, I'm going to go through and talk about Bloom's taxonomy. I'm going to talk about study techniques and other tips for you. And basically, move away from just trying to memorize everything. Try to go in and have a foundation to sort of stand on. Because no one, if you think about it this way, the Mcat pretty much gauges how well you will possibly do in med school. And it gauges how well you could possibly be as a doctor. Nobody wants a doctor that's going to memorize every single disease or whatnot. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to. If you're working in the emergency room as a doctor and a patient comes in, you're not going to immediately start listing every single disease that you've memorized. It's a step-by-step process. There's certain things, key things that you look for. You know, so based on that, it's basically a sense of competency that you are building up by not memorizing things, but by actually learning content and then being able to apply said content. So that's tip number 3. Don't memorize. Don't waste your time by memorizing. And honestly, don't waste the opportunities that you have by just memorizing a whole Kaplan book or the Princeton Review, trying to memorize all this content online. Now, tip number 4, I recommend for any person that is planning on writing the Mcat exam to find a person or a group of people that they can communicate with. The hardest part about writing the Mcat or really preparing for the Mcat is that you have to do a lot of the work yourself. I know I sort of had to go through this when I was getting ready to write the Mcat. Was, okay, well, outside of just planning the time for studying and building a study schedule, how do I really assess myself? Who around me can I work with then? Because a lot of times when it comes to anything that I did in my undergrad, let's say, if I'm studying for an exam, you will most likely have questions about the exam. You'll have questions about the content on the exam. And so who do you ask? Well, you ask your peers. You ask the professor. And for the Mcat, though, you're not directly going and asking the person that's providing this test. I mean, you won't even know who is giving you this test. And by communicating with others, you pretty much have a better leg to stand on, because you have access to basically the answers to many of the questions that you have. In a lot of cases, some people don't have some people they can communicate with. Not everyone's writing the Mcat at the same time, especially in maybe your circle of friends or your peers. That's why I recommend going online, going over to reddit.com, a subreddit there, the Mcat subreddit. A lot of people ask a lot of questions there, so if you definitely have questions, check that out. There's also the Student Doctor Network and a whole lot of other websites that you can find. Take advantage of that, because it will help you quite a bit as you prepare. Because if you just assume that you're gonna just do so well without being able to gauge, how well you're actually doing, you're probably not going to improve. It's the same way with kicking a soccer ball. I mean, I can kick a soccer ball 1,000 times, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be a master kicker. You get well at kicking a soccer ball when you kick it. You learn from the mistakes that you made. You get some sort of feedback from others, and then you go ahead and you apply those corrections. And over time, yes, you can definitely master kicking a soccer ball. So take advantage of that. Communicate with others. Get out there. Socialize with people. If you can't socialize with people and talk about the preparation for the Mcat, ask questions, go online and do it. You don't have to do it physically with someone, but you should definitely go ahead and give that a shot. And now my final and 5th tip for how to prepare for the Mcat exam. Although you should really plan ahead, you should build a study schedule, you should get the content that you're going to study, you should practice, get feedback, all this stuff is fantastic. But a lot of students really fall off when it comes to just taking care of themselves. My 5th tip is don't neglect yourself. Look, I get it, studying for the Mcat's stressful. For a lot of us, we're either working, studying, doing X amount of things. And it's not always easy to, balance all that in your life. I get it. It's going to happen. But going back to when I was talking about preparing, getting started, and planning ahead, also think about giving yourself time. Don't neglect yourself physically. Take time to get some physical activity, to get some physical exercise. If you are already, let's say, as an example, going to the gym 3 times a week, don't sacrifice that just to study for the MCAT. It can be tough. You will most likely have to make a lot of adjustments to your schedule, but what you don't want to do is have to neglect your own personal health, your own mental well-being, just to write the MCAT. I can almost guarantee you that you're not going to do very well on the MCAT if you are sleep deprived, if you're not eating properly, and you're just suffering basically in the process to study for the MCAT. That's not an effective strategy at all. Make sure to treat yourself properly, get enough sleep, make sure that you're eating well, and everything basically will fall in place. I know that sounds a little corny, I know it sounds a little cliche, but it's true. It's not going to help you to study for the MCAT 10 hours. Maybe it will, but 10 hours is, time. You're not really going to spend 10 hours going through all the information, memorizing it or whatnot, learning it, and then applying it. That's not how it works. The MCAT is a challenging exam. That's probably about it's more than 6 hours from the moment you begin and end. And I know you can skip the breaks or whatnot, but the breaks are there for a reason in the MCAT. But it's a challenging exam. It's a very, very challenging exam if you don't effectively prepare for it. So those are my 5 tips for you. Now, if you have any more questions and you just want to personally reach out to me, you can either leave a comment down below, and stay tuned for more videos. I hope to produce some more content to help students just get ready for the MCAT exam. And I'm also going to break down, the sort of content that is on the MCAT based on the concepts that are posted by AAMC, and just to help you guys understand a lot of this. That's my goal. That's my goal with this channel, is to just give back and provide some sort of ways of learning this sort of content. Because I know it's not easy. It's not easy to just read out of a book and all that. And yeah. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you thought, and stay tuned for some more. And definitely hit that subscribe button if you want to see some more from me. All right. Cheers, and I'll see you guys later.